So I just wanted to show you some general lighting tips. The first tip is pretty easy. When you're doing a character with a white background, you want to change the background to something dark, because when you're adding lights in, if your canvas is pure white, it's going to be that much harder to really give the effect of light. So if you start with a darker background, even it doesn't have to be this dark, even a gray or just a toned background, then you'll have a better chance, you'll have a better experience putting in the light. You'll have better control of the light. I like to do a really bright pink, and I do this with a lot of my artwork. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just add a new layer down here, and I'll just sort of airbrush in a little bit of that color. So I'll airbrush it in, and then I'll Gaussian blur it, just so it's even. So I'm just adding in a little bit of this color, so I kind of have an understanding of, where the light is coming from. It just sort of adds to the atmosphere of what you're trying to accomplish. So if you have this pink light over here, then the pink is going to be hitting him from this side. So we'll give him a nice bright glow, and then later on maybe we'll make this brighter as though the light is coming from this direction. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that my layer, my character, is on its own layer and not flat to the background, because you want to have control over all of the edges. So what I'm going to do is select my character. So I just tap on the layer, and then I hit select. And what you can do is open a new layer. So if you open a new layer, then you can still paint, but only anything in that layer will be affected. So it's similar to the clipping mask type thing, but I just don't use them because, I don't know, they're just a bit confusing to me, and I've never used them. I've just sort of used it this way. So now that I have my new layer, the first thing that I'm going to do is take my soft brush, and I'll make sure I'm on the color that I want. And I'm just going to softly airbrush in the light coming from that direction. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is I'll take that same color, but I'll raise it up and just make it a lot lighter. And I'll add another layer of airbrush. And I'm really favoring any part that's really getting hit by the light here. So I'm going to do it a little bit lighter, and I'll do the same thing. Alright. So now we have a little bit of light hitting him from this side. So the next thing, I'll add a layer above that, and I'll go back down to about here, so close to the original color, and I'll just go to light pen. So now it's the layer's deselected, so I could go anywhere. But I'm just going to trace along the outer edge on this new layer. So I'm not gonna affect that layer. I'm on a layer above. And again, I'm favoring all the spots that are going to hit from this light source coming in this direction. So that's why I'm not doing light pen all the way to the front of his head, because I really want to favor the direction that the light is coming from. So with each stroke I make, I'm just sort of trying to envision where that light will be hitting it. And I'm using the lighter area as a guide as well. And I want to make sure I stay on the surface. I probably could have gotten rid of these. Colored outlines, but that's okay. Let me make this a little brighter. And also every now and again I zoom out to see what it looks like at a distance. Because sometimes you can really get too close to something and you don't really see it as a whole. So every now and again just, sort of back up and look at things as a whole. Alright, looks pretty good so far. So what I want to do now is I want to sort of put a shadow on this side of them. Because if there's light hitting here, then I want a shadow on this side. So I'm going to select I'm going to select the original layer again. I'll make a new layer. I'll put it on multiply. And there's a few ways that I can do it, but for now, I'll just go with a dark blue, really dark blue. And I'll just use my airbrush. I'll make it really big and just sort of darken it up as a whole. Now the great thing about doing everything on a different layer is now I can choose an eraser, and if I want to keep it nice and cartoony, then I can just sort of erase out the bits that you don't want. So now that I've figured out the parts that I want erased and the parts that I want to get some light, I can either use my smudge tool, airbrush, and I can start to smudge it back. That's one way to do it. Or I like to take my eraser airbrush and then just sort of slowly smooth away that really hard eraser line. Okay, now I'm just going to smudge some of this back over. Just to kind of even it out. Okay. I'm actually going to make all of this bright as well. So I'm going to go back to that layer. I'm going to go back to light pen. Just looks like it needs to be brighter. Okay. And I'm also going to have the light coming a little bit off of here, because if the light is sort of behind him, it would be hitting this as well. Alright. So this is also a little extra thing. Sometimes you can actually put something that might seem like it's from the light, and it might be hitting his eye as well. But if this light is coming down, and just think about what sort of shapes, like maybe the outside of his eye is getting hit with a lot of that light too. There might be some little light spots on his cheek as well, but I'm going to do that. I'll try and do a really light pink. I'll see if that works with an airbrush. Let's see. I'm just going to select him again, just so I don't go outside of the lines, and I'll go back to this layer. I'll do the rest of the pink on that on this layer, just because that's sort of my base pink light. And I'll put a little bit more at the spots that might get a little more light. For example, right here, that might get a little more light. I'll go a little lighter, and just add it a little lighter here. So now I'm also gonna add some lightness to the little backdrop that we have, that pink. I'm just gonna brighten this up. Blur it a little bit. And I'll also add a little bit of atmosphere. I'll use the noise brush. And I'll also use my favorite, the stubble brush, to make that bigger. And what I like about these is it just gives a little movement to the It gives a little movement to the atmosphere. It kind of makes this light. Add a little bit of a lighter stubble here. It just makes it look like light is actually hitting the air around. And now I'll go to light pen and just add some little pops. Just add some little pops of light. So the next step is I'm just going to add a little bit of almost like a bounce. I'm going to add that behind him. So I'm just going to make a new layer underneath. And I'm going to make it pretty light. And I'm just going to use an airbrush. Doesn't need to be too big. And then I'm just going to airbrush in a nice shimmer. Make sure I add the shimmer on these guys as well. So now we have a really bright light coming from this side, so I want to sort of make a shadow coming off. Oops. So what I'll do is I'll just make a new layer here, and I'll just take sort of a dark blue. I'll just use my graffiti brush for now. And then I'll just smudge it out. And it doesn't look too bad. Now I use my eraser to sort of bring it down a little bit. You don't want it to be super, super harsh. So I just use my airbrush and the eraser, just sort of bring it down a little bit. But I also want to add, I'll make a layer above that because I also want to add some of this pink. Oops. I want to use the airbrush. If this light is coming down, it's also going to be hitting, maybe I'll do it underneath actually. I'll blur that out. Because if this light is coming down, it would also be illuminating the ground a bit. So where's our background layer? Let me bring this up to the other ones. I'll make it a little darker over here as well. So I'll just go with I'll just bring it down here. And I'll just sort of do just sort of do the opposite. Let me mix it in there good. The nice blur. I'll do it on a layer underneath. That way it doesn't mess with my, what's a better color? I'll try that, and I'll do a hue saturation and just check. Sometimes there's colors that you might not think of will look really good. I like that. So the last thing I'll do is I'll just add a nice blue glow, like maybe from down here. So what I'll do is I'll just take a nice light blue color, and first I'll add it into the background. So I'm going to add it in. I'll add some in here. Just blur that a little bit. And then I'll just take a Sketchmaster brush and I'll do it I'll make a new layer on top of everything. So I'll use my regular Sketchmaster. And I'll just make some blue on this side. So this is like the exact opposite of this. The exact opposite of the pink. I'm using the blue on the opposite side to kind of represent a bounce of, you know, some other light coming from a different direction. Put some on his little leg here. And make sure you get these details, like the nail would get its own light. A little bit of the inside toe might get some. There might be a little here, a little here. The inside of this leg might get a little. Inside of this leg might get a little. And we might be able to put a little bit of a blue sheen. So let's see if that works. So I'm going to select my base layer again. I'll just go to that same layer. And let's just test to see if a nice little sheen gives it anything. I'll buy that. So I think it's looking pretty good. I can probably overall darken him up a little bit. So I'm going to select him again. And then I'll go to that layer, my multiply layer, where I put the other shadows. So now that we have these light layers here, now I'm gonna drop my airbrush down to 50% because sometimes it can be a bit harsh. I'll just erase away a little bit. And also I'll erase away a little bit of this. It's a little aggressive, so I'm going to soften that up a bit. And as you can see, it takes a lot of kind of finesse and practice to really get it to look somewhat reasonable. So you just have to kind of take your time and, you know, really continue to work at it. Oh, I can add a little bit. I forgot to add a little bit of a glow. There's my glow layer. So I'll go back to this color and I'll just add a little bit of a shimmer here as well behind him. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Just gives him a little bit of atmosphere. Another quick tip is you can make the background darker. So I'll make a new layer below everything else. I'll bring it way down to almost black. I'll just sort of darken it back here. And I'll add a little noise. And there you have it, some nice kind of funky lighting. And just play around with it, just have some fun with it. Just remember, you want light to come from one direction. You can do a glare light that's sort of opposite, coming from the other way. And also color in the atmosphere, you know, give it a little, make it look like there's actually some sort of space around him that the light is also lighting up. And I just like to have fun with it. I like to add some atmosphere. So hopefully you got something out of this. Hopefully it was helpful. And yeah, keep drawing. I'll see you guys in the next one.